Happy Wednesday, Thanksgiving Eve. Kevin Sofen here, excited to be alongside Rob Clark and Chief Walt Lewis. Rob and Walt, how you guys doing today?
Doing great.
Fantastic, sir. Good to see you
Doing
guys.
great. Thank you.
Well, Rob, see your fancy background. What do you got there in your screen, real or fake?
Oh, it's fake. I wish I had a really cool background like that. My view is I actually do have a good view out my window here, but there's no leaves on the tree. So this is just a cityscape, related to what we are trying to solve from a challenge perspective, obviously, and that's location and where is it most important in dense urban areas, obviously. So, but I'm in the hinterlands of New York. How's that?
That's good. And Chief Lewis, how about yourself? We can't necessarily see your front window, but what's going on in your rear view mirror and your front window?
Well, my background is not very exciting. It's a coat stand that has my Class A uniform and a jacket to stay warm should the temperatures dip below 70 degrees here in Orlando, Florida. But the forward window, what I have a great opportunity of where my office locates is my picture window looks out at taxiways Echo and Foxtrot. And all day long at my job, I get to watch really cool aircraft pass by in both directions, coming and going, and I get to see all types. It's pretty cool to be where I am.
Sounds like a kid's dream. Well, it sounds like my dream, just to stare at technology and planes flying around today, but that's quite the view.
It is pretty neat. If my children are 13 and 15, but if I were an 8-year-old kid, this is the perfect place. I've got construction trucks, because the airport's always got something going on. We've got airplanes, we've got fire trucks, we've got police cars, we've got trains, we've got it all. So the Matchbox inventory is just outside my window, and it's pretty cool.
Well, it's
So it's
okay
probably
for adults and kids then, obviously, because I want to come hang out.
Oh, well, the age is limitless, right?
Exactly.
So there's probably about 1,000 different firefighter nuances and technologies that we could dive into, but one that is a top of mind is this conversation that's been going on since I've been working in the fire service now for about 14 years. But it has to do with firefighter tracking, firefighter accountability, the X, Y, and Z. It almost sounds like we're beating a dead horse, yet we still can't reliably track firefighters, particularly with inside buildings. And I want to dive into a little bit with Chief Lewis, some of your insights within your background, the fire service, particularly now within the work you have at airports. But objectively, from a high level, why is it that we still are struggling at scale to track firefighters generally, but then also track firefighters indoors? And I'll throw it to you first, Chief Lewis.
All right. So the technology exists, right? So I think part of our inhibitor is finances, right? Money drives everything. And then some places aren't just able to produce all that they would like to get. But as we advance into the future, as we build new structures, and as these technologies come down in price, that is definitely something we need to look at, especially as supervisors, leaders, chief officers, to look at for our safety aspect is being able to track our personnel, to be able to get a full accountability as to where they are. Because when we go to an emergency, it could be a house fire, it could be a building fire, it could be something on an airport property, whatever it is, we want to be able to make sure our personnel go serve and then return back and be ready to serve again. And if they're injured along the way, or God bless, God forbid something tragic happens, that really impacts the agency. And then whatever that funding was that was on the front side, we have a challenge of finding will come to hurt us in the penalties that may follow, right? So we got to find that balance. But I see that as being one of the inhibitors. I don't think we're going to be so faced with challenges of change in the future because we're going to recognize the value of being able to track our personnel and see where we can have them operate safely and also know where they're not operating to be able to supplement that location with other personnel. So there are a lot of changes that can come to be. I think it's just going to take some time and also smart money to put in place.
Rob.
Yeah, that's a great point, Chief. You look at, and Kevin, you said, we've been talking about this forever. Why is that? Is we only have really one means of location that we all rely upon, and that's GPS. And, GPS was designed for a specific purpose. And just like anything, over time, you're going to have something that's going to get a little older. What's its performance parameters? What's its resiliency? And what we've seen, obviously, is, degradation of signal has happened. And the question is why? Well, is it antique? Is it because it's 240,000 miles? I don't know distances very well, but it's way up in space. But you think about that and it's sending a signal down and it's casting it down. So you look and say, okay, where's it going to be strongest and where's it designed to be the strongest? But also, was it designed for urban environments, kind of like that wildland urban interface challenges. We have something that was good here, but as we get closer to buildings and we get closer to areas where signals just don't penetrate, that's where we've seen from a tech perspective what those challenges are. But to Chief's point, cost, commercialization, things of that nature, you have to find that intersection where it's really truly going to be viable so that somebody can say, look, as part of my commercial, cost products or standards oriented framework, I can actually go and get this capability. But to your point, the capabilities are there. What we have to do is, kind of that one voice, single solution, single approach mentality and break down the barriers. And I think what I've seen is interesting is having these conversations is really the key to that solution, I believe.
I'll agree. If I can touch on that for a second, Kevin, is now I think is the great time to help start carving out what should be the standard so we don't end up with Betamax, VHS, Laserdisc versions, right? So our generation can relate. We don't have e-books and cassettes, everything else that's out there. So, but this way we can align with like what's the best practice. Different companies can come in from their versions, but this way we can. This is how it should be done. You can have your models, but we want cars. Make your different versions of cars, but this is what it needs to be able to do. I think now we're kind of at that precipice.
So eventually I want to get into the tech integration and the human change management here, but you just talked about sort of the best practices and the way the technology should be designed to kind of lean into that a little bit more. This current state of solutions in terms of how we are tracking firefighters. And again, with both there's the data side, the ethical side, but kind of the hardware software integration, and then the different frequencies that are being used and the challenges that different buildings present. Chief, if you could maybe from your perspective touch on like what high level, what is the current state of solutions and sort of what you've seen work and maybe where are still some of the gaps that exist?
So there's a couple different ways we track our firefighters. None of them are perfect and not all of them work together. So those days are coming, I hope. But for today, so there's technology out there like Quake, which allows me to visually see firefighters through the smoke. And it takes in a thermography. You have thermal imaging cameras that allow us to monitor when we apply them. We also have air packs where we can monitor the use of the air packs and how they transmit back, and then they daisy chain off each other to feed back the information as long as they're in line and line of sight, and that technology can communicate together. But the unification of all those so that it's one defined package is what I would love to see. And then the advancement, and I think it's certainly coming, and it's certainly coming faster than what previous technologies have allowed, is the introduction to those smart buildings. Is that when we show up, that's firefighters able to obtain information of what the building can offer, and that building acts as a giant repeater using our signal to identify on that XYZ axis as to a three-dimensional recreation at the command post or at another key location that allows us to track where all our personnel are operating. And feedback from the building, just being an echo chamber, sharing that information back, gives us all those details, but not just air consumption or what the firefighter sees, but also their biometrics. Because as we wear this firefighting ensemble, we are fully encapsulating ourselves in an ideal age. And if they are somewhat dehydrated going in, then their body core temperature is going to elevate higher faster. And that's if they have done several runs prior to, if they were in a hot environment prior to, if they weren't ready for the Florida fire season, in the summertime in August. So all those things would compound. I think we can get there. So I would love to see those all come together in one defined. This way it's not exclusive to any given manufacturer. So sorry to go broad spans on the whole answer, but hopefully that's what you're looking for.
That's key too. I mean, I'd say I love hearing that, and I hate hearing that, I guess is the best way to say it. I love that there's solutions, there's fines. We've got to get through the smoke. I guess you could say we've got to get through the haze, and there is not yet that single ubiquitous solution. But in order to achieve that vision, to achieve that end state, I believe, we believe conversely as technologists that we have to look at the target longer range. We can't say, hey, we're going to build a product here. It's not about products anymore. Somebody has to, or organizations, entities, break the barriers down, have to have these kinds of conversations. And they're not going to be a one size fits all by each provider. So looking at our side, where are we going to be strongest and best? Well, we have spectrum, we have signal strength, we have that ability to penetrate indoors. Now, is that going to be the right way everywhere? Well, if it is, great. If it's not, that's why you need a resilient network architecture. So, I compare a lot of this to having an ESI net, emergency services IP network. I spent a lot of time as systems integration doing networks. And I looked at that and said, would I rely on just one location service? Absolutely not. What we have to build is a framework of that system of systems. And it's going to include a next now. Let's say it includes an Esri. It's going to include a Chief Walter Lewis in the Orlando Airport Authority, because we need to have everybody at the table that are the practitioners, not a manufacturer, determining what this solution should consist of. So we look at it from our side saying, look, we have a means to do this. We have a means to drive indoors. We've done this before. There's a lot of, elements that, have to be tested out. But when we say, let's do this and let's bring that single unified voice and let's use a solution that's standards oriented, that fits all of our frameworks, and that's going to bring a service. And I say a location service. So I'm just going to kind of generalize that. That service is going to come to your devices, Chief. So your Quake, if that's the device of choice for that individual, that's their tool of the trade, then that needs to be able to provide location. Just like the thermal imaging cameras, just like your SCBAs, they're all going to have, these are all digital nodes. And so with a digital node, it has the capabilities to deliver coordinates. And so we look at that as saying, if you look from a 3GPP perspective and you go standards oriented, and we all agree that it's data, we're in a data oriented environment now going forward, then there's no reason we can't. We just have to understand the operational needs, the device types, the applications, and the networks. And really, if you kind of break those down in 3 swim lanes, those are very, very manageable.
Well, it seems like that we have to continue to engage a lot of these different stakeholders, not only the fire departments, the fire chiefs, and then the actual operators, but also the building, the construction companies. I mean, the building owners, and then even just kind of managing city council and some of the data privacy issues that are at play. But I think particularly from like the buildings itself. I mean, again, in theory, when you hear about these smart connected buildings, and I look at these big players like Honeywell that have all this technology integrated, from repeaters to the sensors to all this information, it seems like sometimes it's still like pulling teeth to get the data to the fire department in the right format. And so whether it's kind of just being able to get the data and then get the data in the right format, and then just still this sort of the whole ethical dynamic of what are you doing with this information. And again, the fire departments are really just trying to do it to protect firefighters' lives and protect the citizens of the community. But Chief Lewis, I'm curious in your thoughts about like where are we at with that dialogue with this multi-stakeholder approach, and how do we continue to break down these unnecessary red tape barriers so we can just continue to move towards the safest technology solutions for first responders?
So there's a couple formats that we need to be able to connect with, and in the technology environments, right? So the wireless conference that the name escapes me, where we met Rob.
WCE.
Thank
Yes,
you.
sir.
IWC. I was close. I wanted to make sure I got it right. So where we connected there, that really helped put together uh, the folks that have the answers to the people that don't even know they have the questions, right? So there's a lot of us in the fire service world that have the wish that we would love to be able to do these things and don't even really know that we need to connect with some of these folks to create the working environment to bring those things together. So now is a pretty exciting time to try and bring those things together. So places like FDIC, where you have a large congregation of firefighters, that you can get the wide variety of what a fire department is and representatives thereof, and the motivated individuals that are working today to lead and that will be the leaders 10 years from now to keep carrying that mission. If we can unite all those factors, we could put this whole thing to work.
So this kind of begs the question of like, well, then why aren't we doing it?
I think we just, the road has brought us to this point to realize, okay, that's where we need to take it next. So I don't think it's anything we haven't done before. I think we've just done enough work to get to this point to now ask that question. And that's
We're
our answer.
closer than we've ever been.
Yes.
I think so too. I mean,
So-
I think so. Why aren't we doing it? We are. I think what we're learning is the different dynamics and the different voices, and really what's changed. What are the change drivers in today's era versus 30 years ago, versus 20 years ago? It's just like the pace of adoption on tech. as we know, as practical technology it's just so fast. I finally gotten to the point where I ask my kid for help on tech, but that's a social media stuff. Uh, but it's so fast. I think what I look at is a lot of individuals are still focused on initiatives that may have started a long time ago, or may have been rooted in a different architecture, or just rooted in hardware. Hardware versus software is something I had to get used to in my career. I started off in semiconductors of all things, doing chemicals. So what does that have to do with this topic? It has everything to do with this topic because technology and industry it's all economies of scale. What I like to say is I've had the ability to see different areas, but when you look at that and you have to bring change, every industry is different. And this industry is specifically different. But when you're driving something like an alternative or complement backup, what NextNav is trying to do beyond just the Z, and that's bring it back up to a national security problem. You're gonna break some glass. I mean, it's going to hit effectively every vertical market in the United States because GPS hits every vertical market in the United States, which is something that we all respectively rely upon, but we don't realize that the risks are there. And I think so. To your point, Chief, firefighters, are they aware? I think they're aware. It's the context. So my belief is, I came off of a session I was invited to last week, and I've been involved in different panels with you, Chief. Kevin, you and I have talked. I've been part of this community for a long time. And one of the things that I just say is I don't accept complacency. We cannot accept just one bulletproof or one blanket statement. We have to get to the root of that challenge and have this discussion, have it at the line, and have it with those that have to get in front of the press when there's a problem, because those problems are going to exist.
Mhm.
I feel for anybody that's on the front line. And I say my job or our job is to back you up. So I like getting down and having the conversations with the true practitioners that are on the line, that have the accountability challenges. And that takes an industry, and it's going to take a different conversation. But what I heard last week at Fairfax County's summit was we need one voice. And it was a different type of call. It was a different voice because it's not by discipline, it's by industry. And I thought that was a very unique way to say it. So I think we really are on the cusps. It's just a matter of how do we drive forward together and make this a reality without saying, hey, nothing's going to work or it's going to impede on this. Let's work it together because that's what integration is about.
Yeah, I was disappointed not to be able to be a part of that because Fairfax is a phenomenal department. They have some very great folks helping lead them and then working there as well. So I was happy to see that you guys hosted there. One thing that's going to be a challenge though is the fire service is it goes back to caveman days. So we've seen a lot of ideas come and go. So I will put the caveat out there that you're going to run into some folks that are just going to roll their eyes and not be so enthused with what technology can offer. And I'm sure you see it on your side of the world too, but I wouldn't want that to stay or dissuade any kind of motivation. So there are some folks that can see the value and want to apply it and put the energy forward. But we're kind of a pessimistic bunch because we've seen a lot of good idea fairies come and sprinkle their dust, and then that idea just kind of dissipates.
Certainly, I've seen that from the vendor community. I mean,
Right.
that's, vendors are, and that's why I say, to your point, we can't just say, hey, we're going to arrive and say, here's my product, because it's not a product solution anymore.
Bingo. So what we got to do is exactly what we've been talking about is we need to merge the two, the growing technology and the folks that can help guide it to where it should deliver. So this
Mhm.
way it's not a product for a problem we don't know we have, and it's not a problem we're not getting answers on. We merge the two and then connect it. So, and there's other sources out there, so I mentioned fire engineering, but fire fusion is a more distilled audience, right? I was in Charleston just recently. So there's
Oh,
other avenues out there that bring these technologies and firefighters together. So, but what great aspects of community that can help bring us together.
Well, Chief, we got to get you to TSI, which is it's in 2 weeks in Irving, Texas, and I'm a little
yeah, you
selfish
do.
for maybe self-interested when saying this, but I believe it's the best fire tech conference in the country. But it just continue to bring together all these different voices like yourself, .gov.org.edu, talking about problems and solutions and doing workshops. So a little plug for TSI. So maybe Chief, we're gonna have to get you there next year, or if you still can make it. It hasn't happened yet, so it's in 2 weeks.
I'm going to throw a plug for it too. I'm a massive, massive supporter. First, I had the opportunity to go to the first one, and I've never looked back. It really is the highlight of my year, and we're proud to be sponsors, be able to be part of it. But it really is a great venue. So Shameless plug number 2.
Well, let me take a look and see what the family calendar allows and see
Yeah,
what magic I can make happen.
be
Love to
great.
have
If
you
you
talking, obviously, on this topic.
Yeah, there will be a session on can you find me now? And then I think we touched on this a little bit, Chief, but I wanted to, from your perspective with some of your background with USAR and with being within Florida and navigating aspects of the Surfside collapse and now kind of working within the airport environment. There's so many different environments that first responders and the fire service encounter. And I'm curious from your experiences, how did that shape your sort of perspective on how these gaps exist and how it really challenges incident commanders' ability to best manage their team and sort of why? I mean, we've talked about in this conversation about like, we're this close, but kind of like the urgency of like, let's continue to sprint so we can implement this technology in a way that's going to benefit first responders for these variety of scenarios that we encounter.
Yeah. So I'm very fortunate, right? So I've been able to be a part of a lot of very unique and interesting opportunities. So I'm very blessed to be in the fire service community. I owe a lot of credit to my family members, my brother Greg and John, that helped guide me into the fire service. My father as well, and then the Orlando Fire Department, and now the Orlando International Airport, and my support that I get here, but also being on the urban search and rescue team, and then and other environments. I think the only thing I haven't done yet is maritime firefighting, which is kind of like that one that I'm okay not to do. But that is a very interesting environment as well. But it applies to here just the same. And it's really where the challenge I face is just I'm not close to water. It's still an hour east. But urban search and rescue, large structure, everything on the airport property is a commercial property. There are no houses here. I've driven the whole property, haven't found one. So it's different from an urban environment where our firefighters going to the routine calls in the urban houses, they become very accustomed to being in a house and understanding that pretty much 10 to 12 feet in any given direction, I'll find a door or window that will lead me to out. That the wood frame structure will probably allow me to have that strong GPS signal to be able to keep an acquisition of my firefighters. Whereas the commercial properties offers a different environment, depth of the structure, the material that it's built with, and the security engagement that is there. So it's the multitude of radio frequencies that are going to interfere with the capability of communication. So it's the layers of security that need to be in place because of being a federal inspection station of international travel that complicates the ability for firefighters to move freely and to be able to be quick connected to technology. So there's a lot of layers to it that an airport offers. And then let's take urban search and rescue, where we may have the broad span environment of an open area that's devastated from a tornado or other wind driven event like a hurricane, or a flooded environment that may just damage or heavily impact the local infrastructure, that you don't have anything to guide off of except for the trees that are still standing and the houses that have no longer floating downriver. So you have a lot of broad open area that will be effective to be tracked. However, you have to have a place that you can track them from. So you have to be within range. On a GPS system, that's not hard, but when it's got to be line of sight, that can be difficult. And then in the collapse environment, like what Surfside offered, that was a very unique circumstance, but there's more coming. We have more buildings. We have more people living in some of those aged buildings, and not all of them are going to survive the environment that they're put through. So here we have Surfside collapse. And one of the challenges we faced when we arrived on scene was half a building still stood where another half of it fell. And nobody knew exactly why that was the case. So structural engineers are tasked right off the bat. Why is that still standing? I don't know. Why did the other half fall? I don't know. So they were crucial to our survival by being able to monitor the building the way with the technology that they have. But our ability to stay tracked with all of our people was not something that was high technology. That goes all the way back to basics of when you were a kid and you had to just let your parents know where you were going. And by having a supervisor monitor a small crew in the high risk environments, that kept an accountability measure. But if we lost radio comms, it came down to verbal, or it became air horns or whistles that allowed those personnel to realize that they were in danger, which today's day we could probably advance upon that, right? But sometimes we got to fall back to that basic because we just don't have that connection yet. But as the time goes, I look forward to having a safer environment for maybe my son or daughter who gets on and does those things that dad did. One thing that I think is worth sharing is the thinking out of the box. So when we wanted to investigate why part of that building was still standing and how much longer do we still have, the structural engineer investigated interior columns in the basement by using a drone, sent it in, flew it in, lost signal, and it returned to home like it should. They couldn't get the full value of what those columns need, what they needed. So they communicated with the bomb squad and brought in a tracked robot, tethered, and dropped a repeater in there and used technology to their advantage and allowed that common day technology, well known, to allow the UAV to fly all areas to at least investigate as much as they could to see what the structure was still going to offer them. So just some simple things to put together and put some smart people in the room and figure out the solution. We could take that same common thought process and apply it to today to help advance what our technology can be in the future. So in the urban search and rescue environment, when another building tips over and falls over and what's it going to last for us, we can have that better connectivity as to where our people are and what dangers they go to. And then as something changes from when we sent them in to go work, and now they have to be notified, we can do it in an immediate fashion, and not just because it's a whistle or a air horn that tells them a blanket statement of get out or that there's a problem. We can tell them what the problem is so they know what they have to do to improve their chances of survival.
Yeah, it's a lot there. I mean, I can't. Where do you unpack that? I think for what I look at is you talk about urban, you talk about collapses. I was reading something this morning. It's about what the largest city in the world is now. It's Jakarta, Indonesia, and it's 42 million people, and it just was mind-boggling to me. But then I thought back to in context here, any city here, the vast majority of the population lives within, I think it's like 40 miles or something of an urban area. And that equals a lot of people going into urban areas and going indoors. We spend a lot of our time indoors. In fact, I think it's like 80% of our time is spent indoors. But that being said, what are the common things that the public uses? And that's what we look at as technologists. You find that path of least resistance and you try and make it, is it viable? But then how do we lean into that? And to your point, having so many folks going in, what do you do indoors depending on the materials? The things that amplify to me is we can certainly look at environments, but it doesn't matter what the environment is. And these are things that we've seen more and more is whether it's in an urban environment or it's a single story storage facility, like this gentleman, Kevin Roach, was talking last week about it's a sofa, I think it's a sofa store. Is it Charleston?
Charleston Super Sofa. Yep.
Talked about that. He went through the whole incident. He went through everything, and it's painful because you listen to the calls. And to your point, the maydays, where is it? The audio. These people were dying, and they passed, and that's not acceptable. I mean, I just sit there. It's like it rips you apart because we're sitting here going. And Assistant Chief Reed, she had said, I didn't realize that it was that big of a problem. I didn't know that X and Y. We talk about Z all the time, but the X and Y couldn't even determine within 40 person was 40 feet from the entrance. And I just think, how is that possible in today's day and age? You know what? It is possible because we're not unifying our voice. We're not cutting across all those boundaries and we're not looking at downstream. Where's that technology intersection going to be? Because hearing it in 40 feet in, that was one that was very, very, but you look at the degradation of one signal. Certainly, we have capabilities. We have device-based hybrid. There's benefits there. You have in building. But what are those worst case scenarios? What are the worst case scenarios for your folks? They're going to come and get a guy like me. My 911 call is just me. You're rescuing me with how many people? So you're putting your lives at risk to come find me. There's no reason anybody shouldn't be getting out and finding their way home. And there's no excuse for that. So what we say is we're ready. NextNav wants to play. We have a solution. We need to work together across all this. And certainly there's an FCC component in this. So we look at, is there a path? Yes, there is. We want to work with this. We want to work with everybody out there so that we can define that ecosystem together, because my solution is going to benefit your end customers, your end users. And I think that together is the strongest thing we can all do.
And I want to build on that to kind of lean into some of the barriers and obstacles that we face today. I mean, particularly, let's say GPS is this single source of location that most people are familiar with, and the challenge of GPS jamming and interference, and just the sometimes over reliance on a single technology. We've heard more about jamming and more on interference, and Chief Lewis, I'm curious to start with you about kind of this when we're relying on a single redundancy. And even, you today earlier, having different options to get onto this video call. It's always good to have options and redundancy and resiliency built in. Curious if you could speak on this GPS jamming interference as kind of a macro level concern, and why we need to kind of continue to take a multifaceted approach when looking at this firefighter tracking conversation.
Well, certainly we don't want anything that has a single point failure, right? So we want that puts us at greater risk. So that it becomes linear at that point. We want it to be a lot more serviceable by multiple means. So even if it's unintentional, where the signal is just not necessarily jammed, but it's just not connected, maybe a device failure or a satellite issue or solar flare or something else that causes it naturally. So we want it to be able to have that redundancy. And parachutists don't jump out with just one parachute; they have a reserve chute. So because their life is literally on the line for it. So I think we need to adopt that philosophy to make sure that capability is still there. A lot of what the fire service is we have a very common plan A. However, we also have contingencies should the plan A not work out. And anytime there's technology involved, we want to make sure that we have that redundancy there. As reliable as it is, as effective as it is, we still also have to make sure that we are able to resort back to what do we have to do if the lights go out, if we lose power, if our GPS is jammed intentionally or not. But there's always the susceptibility on nefarious actors out there, right? So, and whether they meant to harm our capabilities, it may just be the collateral damage that it is part of it. So if it was a nefarious actor that had a terrorist event that created the event that we're now going to go rescue people, that takes out our capability to communicate and maintain and monitor where our personnel are. The redundancy needs to be in place to be able to safely navigate that scenario, because the tragedy started. We shouldn't compound it because of our response.
No, I mean, just a quick comment on that. I mean, that's beyond just, you look at who does that impact? Law enforcement impacts individual citizens, federal employees, things of that nature. But jamming and spoofing is, as we've all seen, I mean, it's become much more prominent in the public eye. And I think obviously the conversation that we're having here has been amplified by, what's been going on in the global theater for the last few years. And everybody started seeing this in Ukraine at first, and then Israel, Gaza. But, when jamming's occurring, that's a dangerous thing because it impacts everybody. It impacts the civilian infrastructure as well as the military conflict. But we see GPS jamming all the time, whether it's localized or whether it's over a big swath of the US border, which is an area where it had been where jamming was going on regularly. Or you see different publications, like there was one instance down in Mobile, Alabama. Somebody had this some genius, and I say this with quotes, thought it'd be a great idea to go and get a jammer and set up a big operation where they were just going to jam the Alabama, I think it was in Birmingham, or Mobile's comm center. So why are you going to do that? But you look at the non-state actors, to your point, solar activity. That's the one that scares me more than anything, to be honest with you, because it's real, it's unpredictable, it's up there, and everything we do relies on satellites. It relies on GPS. We have got to diversify that. Just like I said, an ESI net, we could have a point-to-point infrastructure failure. You're going to have a 911 call. It's going to go down. I mean, these are things that we've worked beyond as technology providers and as practitioners in the industry for years. We've got to keep that going on this downstream side. So whereas we've looked at all the things talked about NG 911 and diverse call routing paths, I think that one's moving. I think it really has started getting legs. There's different areas that do it differently, but there's not one size fits all formula, which is key. So if you look and say, all right, I've got to have a system of systems for backup to GPS. That's got to hit a lot of stuff, and it's got to hit cities. It's got to hit deserts. It's got to hit water. Not the same morphology. So whereas a NextNav could be great here, you need an LEO here. You may need a top level geo satellite or whatever the terms are, but you've got to have different layers, because if one is going to get hit, let's say space, we're going to have, let's say, a G5 solar flare. That's going to mess things up. It's going to screw up comms. It's going to mess down location. You're going to have timing issues, which is what this all boils down to. And what you may try, and I challenge you, no, not as a challenge, if you want to see real world implications, it's happening every day. If you go and just put in a navigation on your phone, go and put that navigation, just drive somewhere. And I challenge you to tell me that your nav and your speed is not going to start doing flippy floppies. because you could be doing 65 miles an hour. You look at your speedometer on your dash. I had my wife and daughter do this just so I could validate they've seen it too. And then you have your phone. And so you've got your nav going here. Now watch your speed go from 60 to 95, and then it's going to drop back down. That happens just in an open road. I've had that happen to me a number of times. And that's why I say it's consistently inconsistent. And I don't know what the cause is, but the impact, the cause are things like solar activity. Absolutely. Things like nation state actors. Absolutely. Things like antiquated architecture. Absolutely. So I think we've all woken up saying, yeah, we've got the smack in the fit. We got to do something here. We have a problem, but that doesn't mean it's something that we should all stand back and just wait. Or if somebody says, hey, I got an idea, don't poo poo it. Everybody's ideas have merit and value. And I think that's the number one message I would say is, when I first got into this industry, we started talking about, control room solutions. They're looking at me like I was from another planet. And I said, look, I had the benefit of working offshore to understand different technology types, to understand how different tech can work. So if we bring these capabilities in and we start looking at this as part of our ecosystem, yes, it's different, but it's solving a challenge. We just have to think a little bit differently.
So it's November 2025. PSI is in 2 weeks. And like Chief Lewis, I hope the family calendar works out to maybe you can attend. It'd be great to have you. Where do you see us in 12 months, 60 months? We've never been closer, but we still have a lot of work to do. Chief Lewis, and start with you first, then Rob, of where we're going to be in 12 months, 1 year, 5 years from now.
Good question. I think, like we mentioned a little bit ago, I think we're at the doorstep of being able to connect who we need to and what we need to start pushing things forward in the right direction. So I would like to say in a year from now that we've got a good roadmap laid out with key stakeholders signed on to help build what we need to, invested to want to build this for the future. So, and then 5 years from now, being very proud of what's been built and put together with a little bit of tweaking so that 10 years from now, my children are benefiting from the work we're doing today.
I love that because I think that's the exact same thing. We look at it a year from now, we're all at the table designing this thing. There's an action path that the FCC has taken. There's an action path that the federal government's taken. I mean, these are all the things that we need. And there's an action path for every one of us to be sitting and designing that architecture together. 5 years? Yeah, it's up. Absolutely. Because I have the same passion you do, Chief, is I'm not in this industry to make lots of money. I could have stayed in semiconductors for that. You're not in this industry. We're in this. People that serve this industry are in it for a different reason. I truly believe. I myself consider myself a public servant because it's not about me. It's about my kid. And I have a child with special needs. My child needs location. She needs navigation. She needs consistency, reliability. And if I can't deliver that to her and we can't, then I've failed. So to me, it's not about us. It's about our kids. So we need to look and say, hey, I'm the old guy here. I need to look, I'm the guy that's got to adapt, not my kid. So I think that's, for me, I appreciate this. And I say to get there, we have to all make the noise together, but we got to sing with one voice. And so I think it's conversations like this that we need to all say, yeah, we're all going for the same thing. So let's make that call to action together.
Well, shout out to Dr. Laurie for continuing to beat the drum on the one voice across the fire service, from nearest to data and just, but more so just everyone continue to speak the same tune and same voice. So Chief Lewis, it's been a pleasure to learn more about work you're doing, and excited we should expand upon this of other technology nuances that you're exploring within your desk, particularly looking out the windows. Consider this another invite to the next conversation. And Rob, always a pleasure. And I hope you all have a great, fun, and safe Thanksgiving holiday.
And you as well.
Likewise. Thanks, guys. I appreciate the opportunity and then just a chance to be able to share. So thank you so much.
Great to see you, Chief. Thank you. Both of y'all have a wonderful Thanksgiving.
See ya.
See you at TSI.